The sun was high in the clear blue sky as Harold Jenkins pulled his old, well-kept Buick into the parking lot of Luxury Motors. The dealership's glass windows gleamed, reflecting the sunlight like mirrors. Rows of shiny new cars sat in perfect lines, their polished surfaces sparkling. Harold had been dreaming of this day for years. At 72 years old, Harold had the slight stoop that comes with age, but he moved with purpose as he stepped out of his car. Today he wore his gardening clothes, faded blue overalls with patches on the knees, and a simple white t-shirt underneath. His boots were sturdy but worn from years of working in his beloved garden. A worn baseball cap covered his gray hair. He hadn't dressed up because he was just coming to look, to ask questions. The buying would come later. Harold patted his pocket, feeling the small notebook where he'd written down all his research. For 3 years he'd been saving and planning for this purchase. After his wife passed away, he'd decided it was finally time to get the car they had always talked about owning someday. He knew exactly which model he wanted, right down to the engine specs and interior options. As Harold pushed open the heavy glass door to the showroom, cool air rushed out to meet him. Inside, everything was sleek and modern, white floors that shone like ice, bright lights, and that new car smell filling the air. Soft music played from hidden speakers. 3 salesmen stood in a small group near a red sports car, talking and laughing. When the door closed behind Harold with a soft thud, they all turned to look. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the tallest of the 3, a young man with perfectly styled hair and a crisp blue suit, whispered something to the others. They snickered, trying to hide their smiles behind their hands. Harold pretended not to notice as he walked slowly around a silver sedan, the very model he'd been researching. He bent down slightly to peer at the price sticker on the window, then straightened up and ran his hand gently along the smooth paint. "Can I help you, sir?" The tall salesman had approached, standing a careful distance away. His name tag read Blake. His tone was polite on the surface, but underneath ran a current of something else. His eyes darted to his colleagues, who watched with amused expressions. "Yes, I'm interested in this model," Harold said, his voice soft but clear. "I've been looking at these for some time now." Blake looked Harold up and down, taking in the old overalls, the worn boots, the weathered hands. "This particular vehicle starts at $85,000, he said, emphasizing the price. The monthly payments would be quite substantial. Harold nodded. "I understand. I'd like to know about the engine options, and if you have it in navy blue." A barely concealed smirk crossed Blake's face. He glanced back at his colleagues again, who were watching the interaction with undisguised interest. "Sir," Blake said, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret, "we have some very nice used cars at our sister location across town. They might be more comfortable for your situation." His emphasis on the word comfortable made his meaning clear. Harold stood perfectly still. In his 72 years, he had faced moments like this before. His eyes, still sharp despite his age, took in everything: the dismissive posture, the barely hidden contempt, the assumption that the color of his skin and his casual clothes meant he couldn't afford to be there. "I see," he said quietly. His expression remained dignified, not revealing the hurt or anger that flashed inside him. With careful movements, he tucked his notebook back into his pocket. "Thank you for your time." As Harold walked toward the door, he heard the salesman break into poorly suppressed laughter. His back remained straight, his pace unhurried. Not once did he look back. The heavy glass door closed behind him with a soft click. In his car, Harold sat for a long moment, hands resting on the steering wheel. He looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror, at the lines on his face that told stories of a lifetime of experiences both good and bad. Slowly, a small, determined smile formed on his lips. He started the engine. "Tomorrow," he whispered to himself, "tomorrow will be different." Harold's old Buick rumbled down the quiet street as the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. By the time he pulled into the driveway of his small brick home, shadows had stretched across the neatly trimmed lawn. The disappointment of the day still sat heavy in his chest, but the anger had faded during the drive. He stepped onto the porch where wind chimes sang softly in the evening breeze. These chimes were Elaine's favorite. She had hung them there 30 years ago. Harold unlocked the door and walked inside, greeted by the familiar smell of lemon polish and old books. "I'm home," he said quietly to the empty house, a habit he couldn't break 2 years after Elaine's passing. Harold hung his cap on the hook by the door and made his way to the kitchen. He filled the kettle and set it on the stove, then stood at the window looking out at his garden while waiting for the water to boil. His rose bushes needed pruning soon. Elaine had loved those roses, especially the yellow ones. The whistle of the kettle pulled him from his thoughts. He made a cup of tea and carried it to the living room, settling into his worn leather armchair with a soft groan. From here, Harold could see the wall of photographs that told the story of his life. There he was as a young man in 1968, arm in arm with friends at a civil rights march, determination bright in their eyes despite the dangers they faced. Next to it hung his college graduation photo, proud in cap and gown, the first in his family to earn a degree. Harold sipped his tea, remembering how his mother had cried that day. His eyes moved to a photo of him standing in front of Palmer High School on his first day as principal. For 30 years he had walked those halls, mentoring troubled students, challenging the bright ones, fighting for resources for all of them. He had seen potential where others saw problems. How many young people had he guided? Hundreds, maybe thousands. The largest frame held his favorite picture, Harold and Elaine on their 40th wedding anniversary, dancing under string lights in their backyard. Her smile still warmed his heart. They had been saving for that luxury car for years, planning to travel the country in style during their retirement. After she got sick, those plans were put on hold. After she was gone, the idea of buying the car seemed pointless. Until last month when Harold found Elaine's journal. On the last page she had written, "Don't forget to live, Harold. Get that car we talked about. See those places. Do it for both of us." Harold set down his teacup and walked to the hallway closet. From the top shelf, he pulled down a shoebox filled with bank statements and investment records. He carried it to the dining table and spread out the papers. Over the decades, while living modestly in this small house, Harold and Elaine had invested wisely. His teacher's pension, their careful savings, and some surprisingly successful stock picks had grown into a substantial sum, more than enough to buy any car in that dealership cash in hand. Harold had never been one to show off his success or demand respect. His parents had taught him that true dignity came from within, not from what others thought of you. But today at the dealership, something had shifted inside him. Those young men had judged him by his appearance, by the color of his skin, by his age. They had looked at his work clothes and decided he didn't belong there. He gathered the financial papers and placed them carefully in his leather portfolio. Then Harold walked to his bedroom closet and pulled out the garment bag containing his best suit, charcoal gray, tailored, worn only for graduations and special occasions at the school. As he laid the suit on his bed, Harold thought about all the times in his life when people had underestimated him, and how he had always let his actions speak louder than any words could. Tomorrow would be no different. He picked up the framed photo of Elaine from his nightstand. "You always did enjoy a good lesson in manners," he told her smiling face. "I think tomorrow might be quite educational for some people." For the first time that day, Harold laughed, a warm, rich sound that filled the quiet house. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. Harold woke before his alarm clock had a chance to ring. The early morning sunlight filtered through his curtains, casting a golden glow across his bedroom. For a moment, he lay still, listening to the birds singing outside his window. Today was going to be important. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, feeling the usual stiffness in his knees. At 72, mornings weren't as easy as they used to be, but Harold had never been one to complain. He stood slowly and went through his stretching routine, the same one he'd done every morning for the past 20 years. "Big day today, Elaine," he said to the photograph on his nightstand. Talking to her picture had become a habit that brought him comfort. Sometimes he could almost hear her laughing reply. Harold took extra care in the bathroom, trimming his silver beard to perfection and smoothing lotion onto his dark skin. Age had added lines to his face, but his eyes remained bright and alert, filled with the wisdom of his years. After a simple breakfast of oatmeal and fruit, Harold stepped out into his garden. The morning air was cool, and dew still clung to the leaves and petals of his beloved roses. Gardening had always been his way of finding peace, a lesson his grandfather had taught him long ago. He carefully cut 3 of his finest yellow roses, wrapped their stems in a damp paper towel, and placed them in a small vase. "For courage," he whispered, another one of Elaine's sayings. She had always put fresh flowers on the table before important events. Back inside, Harold laid out his best suit on the bed, the charcoal gray one he had worn to receive his Lifetime Achievement Award in education 5 years ago. He polished his dress shoes until they gleamed and selected his favorite tie, a deep blue one that Elaine had given him on their last anniversary together. As he dressed, Harold thought about the young salesmen at the dealership. He wondered about their lives, their stories. Had someone taught them to judge people by appearances, or had they simply never been shown a different way? Either way, today might change something for them. Harold stood before the mirror, adjusting his tie. The man who looked back at him was not just an elderly gardener in overalls, but a man who had shaped young minds for 3 decades, who had marched for equality when doing so was dangerous, who had built a good life through hard work and wise choices. From his closet safe, he retrieved his leather portfolio containing all his financial documents. He tucked it under his arm, then picked up his phone and made a call. "Good morning, Thomas," he said to his longtime friend and financial advisor. "I'm heading to Luxury Motors today." "Yes, that's right." "I think I'll finally get that car Elaine and I talked about for so long." He listened for a moment, then chuckled. "Well, I might have something else in mind too. Could you be available around 11 if I need you?" "Wonderful. Thank you, my friend." Before leaving, Harold walked through his home one last time, drawing strength from the memories it held. In the living room, he paused by a photograph of himself with a group of students from his last year as principal. Among those young faces was a boy named Michael Carrington, a troubled teen who had nearly been expelled before Harold took a special interest in him. Wonder whatever happened to that boy, Harold mused, though he knew exactly where Michael was now. He had kept track of many of his former students over the years, quietly proud of their successes. Harold picked up the vase with the 3 yellow roses and placed it in the center of his kitchen table. Then he gathered his keys, his wallet, and the leather portfolio. In his driveway, he looked at his old Buick one last time. The faithful car had served him well for 15 years. One more important trip, he told it, patting the hood affectionately. As Harold drove toward Luxury Motors, his heart beat a little faster, but his resolve was firm. Yesterday, they had seen only what they wanted to see. Today, they would see Harold Jenkins as he truly was, and perhaps learn something in the process. He pulled into the dealership parking lot just as the clock struck 10. The same row of gleaming cars greeted him, and through the glass doors, he could see the same group of salesmen huddled near the entrance. Harold straightened his tie, tucked his portfolio under his arm, and stepped out of his car. It was time. The glass doors of Luxury Motors slid open with a soft hiss as Harold stepped inside. The showroom looked even more impressive in the morning light. Sunbeams danced across polished hoods and sparkled on chrome details. The air smelled of new leather and expensive cologne. The group of salesmen near the entrance fell silent as Harold walked in. Gone were yesterday's overalls and worn boots, replaced by a perfectly tailored suit that highlighted his still strong shoulders. His shoes gleamed with a mirror shine, and the leather portfolio tucked under his arm looked expensive and well cared for. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Blake, the tall salesman from yesterday, straightened his tie and stepped forward. His eyes widened slightly as he recognized Harold, confusion flashing across his face. "Good morning, sir," Blake said, his voice carrying a new note of respect that hadn't been there the day before. "Welcome back to Luxury Motors. How can I assist you today?" Harold nodded politely. "Good morning. I'd like to speak with the owner, please." Blake's smile faltered slightly. "Mr. Carrington is quite busy this morning. Perhaps I could help you instead. I'd be happy to show you any vehicle that interests you." "I appreciate that," Harold replied calmly, "but I'll wait for Mr. Carrington. We have some business to discuss." The other salesmen exchanged glances. One of them, a younger man with red hair, leaned toward Blake and whispered something. Blake shook his head slightly, then turned back to Harold with a professional smile. "May I ask what this is regarding? Mr. Carrington typically sees clients by appointment only." Harold's expression remained pleasant but firm. "You may tell him that Harold Jenkins is here to see him. I believe he'll make time." Blake hesitated, then nodded stiffly. Please, make yourself comfortable in our waiting area. I'll see if Mr. Carrington is available. Harold settled into one of the plush leather chairs in the waiting area while Blake disappeared through a door marked Management. The remaining salesmen tried to look busy, but Harold could feel their curious glances. He sat perfectly still, his portfolio resting on his knees, his back straight despite his years. 5 minutes passed. 10. Harold checked his watch but showed no signs of impatience. From his seat, he could see yesterday's silver sedan still gleaming on its display platform. Next to it stood a navy blue version of the same model, the exact color he had inquired about. After 15 minutes, Blake returned looking slightly flustered. Mr. Carrington is on a call, but he'll be with you shortly. Can I offer you some coffee while you wait? Water would be fine, thank you, Harold replied. As Blake hurried away, Harold pulled out his phone and made a quick call. Thomas? Yes, I'm at the dealership now. They're keeping me waiting. He listened for a moment, then chuckled softly. No need for that just yet. Let's give them a little more time. Just as he ended the call, the door to the management offices swung open. A man in his mid-40s stepped out, dressed in an expensive suit with a dealership pin on his lapel. His hair was beginning to gray at the temples, and he moved with the confident stride of someone used to being in charge. He scanned the showroom, spotted Harold, and stopped dead in his tracks. For a second, he stared as if seeing a ghost. Then his face broke into a genuine smile of surprise and delight. Mr. Jenkins? He called out, already moving toward Harold. Harold Jenkins, is that really you? Harold stood, a warm smile spreading across his face. Hello, Michael. It's been a long time. Michael Carrington, owner of Luxury Motors, rushed forward and clasped Harold's hand in both of his. My God, it really is you. When they said an elderly gentleman was asking for me by name, I never imagined. He shook his head in wonder. What are you doing here? The salesman watched in stunned silence as their boss embraced the old man they had dismissed just yesterday. Blake, returning with a glass of water, nearly dropped it when he saw the scene unfolding. You know this gentleman, sir? He asked, his voice unnaturally high. Michael turned, his arms still around Harold's shoulders. His expression held a mixture of joy and something else, something that made Blake take an involuntary step backward. Know him? Michael said, his voice carrying throughout the showroom. Gentlemen, this man changed my life. Harold's eyes twinkled with amusement as every salesman in the room turned to stare at him with new eyes, wondering exactly who this elderly man in the perfect suit really was. The showroom of Luxury Motors had fallen completely silent. Everyone watched as Michael Carrington, the owner himself, stood with his arm around Harold's shoulders, beaming like a son who had just found his long-lost father. This man, Michael continued, his voice filled with emotion, was my high school principal when everyone else had written me off as a lost cause. He turned to Harold with deep respect in his eyes. Mr. Jenkins gave me a second chance when I didn't deserve one. Harold smiled warmly. You just needed someone to believe in you, Michael. And look at you now. Michael led Harold toward his office, gesturing for them to follow. Let's talk in private. As they walked, he called over his shoulder, Blake, bring us some coffee, please. Blake, still looking stunned, nodded quickly and hurried toward the break room. The other salesmen whispered among themselves, stealing glances at Harold's retreating figure. Michael's office was spacious and tastefully decorated with photos of classic cars and framed awards. He offered Harold the most comfortable chair and sat not behind his impressive desk, but in the chair beside him. It's been what, 20 years? Michael asked, shaking his head in wonder. 22, Harold corrected gently. You were in my last graduating class before I retired. Michael laughed. That's right. I was the kid who nearly got expelled for hot wiring the chemistry teacher's car. You were brilliant with engines even then, Harold said. Just needed to find a better way to use that talent. A knock at the door interrupted them as Blake entered with a tray holding a coffee pot and cups. His hands trembled slightly as he set it down, spilling a few drops on the tray. Thank you, Blake, Michael said. Please close the door on your way out. Once they were alone, Michael poured coffee for both of them. So, what brings you to my dealership after all these years? Looking for a new car. Harold took a sip of his coffee before answering. Actually, I was here yesterday. Michael's brow furrowed. Yesterday? Nobody told me. I wasn't dressed like this, Harold explained, gesturing to his suit. I came in my gardening clothes. I was told rather quickly that perhaps the used car lot down the street would be more suitable for someone like me. The cup in Michael's hand froze halfway to his lips. What? Who said that to you? The young man who just brought our coffee. Blake, I believe his name is. Michael's face darkened with anger. He set his cup down with a sharp click against the saucer. I'm sorry, Mr. Jenkins. That's completely unacceptable. I'll deal with him immediately. Harold held up his hand. Before you do, there's something else I'd like to discuss. He opened his leather portfolio and removed several documents, laying them on the coffee table between them. I came yesterday because I was finally ready to buy the car my late wife and I had been saving for. I've done quite well with my investments over the years. Michael leaned forward to look at the papers, bank statements showing accounts with substantial balances, investment portfolios worth several times the cost of any car in the showroom, and an impeccable credit report. His eyes widened. Mr. Jenkins, I had no idea. Few people do, Harold said with a small smile. Elaine and I lived simply, but we saved and invested wisely. We believed that true wealth isn't about showing off, but about having choices. He paused, his expression becoming more serious. And today, I find myself with an interesting choice to make. Michael looked up from the documents, curiosity clear on his face. What kind of choice? Harold leaned back in his chair, studying the man before him, once a troubled teenager, now a successful business owner. Last week, I was approached by a group looking for investors in a new luxury car dealership they're opening across town. They were quite persistent. The color drained from Michael's face. A new dealership, that would be serious competition. Indeed it would, Harold agreed calmly. After yesterday's experience, I was inclined to accept their offer. He watched as Michael's expression fell. However, seeing you today has reminded me of something important. What's that? Michael asked quietly. Harold smiled, his eyes warm with wisdom accumulated over 72 years of life. That sometimes the right response to disrespect isn't walking away. Sometimes it's staying to help make things better. Michael stared at him, confusion slowly giving way to understanding. Mr. Jenkins, what exactly are you proposing? Michael leaned forward in his chair, his coffee forgotten. The afternoon sun slanted through the office blinds, casting stripes of light across the polished desk between them. Outside, they could hear the muffled sounds of customers and salespeople in the showroom, but in here, time seemed to stand still as Harold considered his next words carefully. I'm proposing a partnership, Harold finally said, his deep voice calm and measured. An investment in luxury motors rather than your competition. Michael blinked in surprise. You want to invest in my dealership, even after how you were treated yesterday? Harold nodded slowly. When I was teaching, I always believed that mistakes were opportunities for growth, not just reasons for punishment. He tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the portfolio. But I do have one condition. Name it, Michael said without hesitation. Harold's eyes held a mixture of kindness and determination. I want to establish a comprehensive training program for your staff. One that teaches them to treat every person who walks through those doors with respect, regardless of how they're dressed or what they look like. Michael sat back, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. You know, when I started this business 15 years ago, I always swore I'd run it differently than other dealerships. Somewhere along the way, his voice trailed off, and he shook his head. I've been so focused on the numbers that I forgot about the people. It happens, Harold said gently. Success can sometimes make us forget where we came from. Michael stood suddenly and walked to the window overlooking the showroom floor. Through the blinds, he could see Blake and the other salesmen huddled together, occasionally glancing toward the office door. They're probably wondering if they still have jobs, Michael said with a humorless laugh. Harold joined him at the window. Everyone deserves a chance to learn and improve, Michael, even Blake. Michael turned to face his former principal. Just like you gave me a chance all those years ago, he extended his hand. I accept your proposal, Mr. Jenkins, both the investment and the condition. It would be my honor to have you as a partner. Harold shook his hand firmly. Call me Harold. We're partners now. Just then, a knock sounded at the door. Michael called for the person to enter, and Thomas, Harold's financial advisor, stepped into the office. He was a trim man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses. "Right on time," Harold said with a smile. "Michael, this is Thomas Wilson, my financial advisor." "Thomas, meet Michael Carrington, my new business partner." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "So you decided against the competitor's offer?" "I found a better investment opportunity," Harold replied, his eyes twinkling. "One with heart." The three men spent the next hour discussing the details of the partnership. Harold would provide capital that would allow Luxury Motors to expand its showroom and inventory, while also developing the new training program. In return, he would receive a percentage of the dealership's profits. "I'd like you to be the face of the training program," Michael told Harold as they finalized the agreement. "Your experience as an educator would be invaluable." Harold nodded thoughtfully. "I'd be happy to help design it, but I think we need something more." He paused, then added, "I'd like Blake to assist me." Michael nearly choked on his coffee. "Blake? The same salesman who dismissed you yesterday." "Sometimes the best teachers are those who've made mistakes themselves," Harold explained. "Blake has first-hand experience with the problem we're trying to solve. With the right guidance, he could become your most valuable employee." Thomas chuckled. "Still seeing potential in unlikely places, aren't you, Harold?" Harold smiled. "It served me well with Michael, didn't it?" As they wrapped up their meeting, Michael asked, "There's one thing I still don't understand. Why did you come back today? Most people would have just gone to another dealership after being treated that way." Harold's expression grew thoughtful. "My late wife, Elaine, always had a saying, 'Don't just walk away from ignorance, help replace it with understanding.' Coming back was what she would have wanted me to do." Michael nodded, visibly moved. "Well, I'm grateful you did." He stood and extended his hand once more. "Shall we go share the news with the staff? I think they've been sweating long enough." Harold rose to his feet with a smile. "I think that's an excellent idea. And afterward, perhaps we can discuss that navy blue sedan I came to see yesterday. After all, I did promise Elaine I'd finally get that car." Together, the new partners walked toward the office door, ready to transform not just a business, but the people within it. 6 months had passed since that life-changing day at Luxury Motors. The dealership looked different now, not just the expanded showroom with its gleaming new vehicles, but the atmosphere itself had transformed. Harold parked his navy blue luxury sedan in his usual spot near the entrance. The car was everything he and Elaine had dreamed about: comfortable, elegant, and powerful. Sometimes when he drove along the coast with the windows down, he could almost feel her sitting beside him, smiling in the sunshine. As Harold walked through the main doors, he was greeted warmly by the receptionist. "Good morning, Mr. Jenkins. Beautiful day, isn't it?" "It certainly is, Diane. Is everything ready for the ceremony?" She nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, sir. Everyone's gathering in the new wing." Harold made his way through the showroom, stopping occasionally to straighten a pamphlet or adjust a display. Though he wasn't involved in day-to-day operations, the staff had come to expect these small touches from their new partner. They called it the Jenkins inspection with affectionate respect. The new wing of Luxury Motors was Harold's pride and joy, a spacious, modern addition that had doubled the dealership's capacity. Large windows let in natural light, illuminating the vehicles that were now arranged to allow customers to browse comfortably. In the center of the room stood something covered by a large velvet cloth. People were already gathering: employees, customers, even a few local business leaders who had been invited for the special occasion. Michael spotted Harold entering and hurried over to greet him. "There he is, the man of the hour," Michael said, clapping Harold on the shoulder. "Ready for the big reveal?" Harold smiled. "As ready as I'll ever be." Near the back of the crowd, Harold spotted Blake looking nervous in his new position as training director. The past 6 months hadn't been easy for the young man. When Michael had first announced the changes coming to Luxury Motors, including Harold's role as the new partner and the mandatory respect training program, Blake had almost quit on the spot. "I'll never forget that first training session," Harold said to Michael, nodding toward Blake. "I thought he might bolt for the door." Michael chuckled. "Instead, he ended up being your star pupil." It was true. After his initial resistance, Blake had thrown himself into the training program with surprising dedication. When Harold shared his experiences with discrimination throughout his life, from being turned away from restaurants in the 1960s to being followed in stores even as a respected school principal, something had shifted in Blake's understanding. "It's time," Michael said, gesturing toward the covered object in the center of the room. "Would you like to say a few words first?" Harold nodded and followed Michael to the front of the gathering. The crowd quieted as Michael tapped a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming today. 6 months ago, Luxury Motors was just another car dealership. Today, we're proud to say we've become something more, a business built on respect, integrity, and second chances." Michael turned to Harold. "None of this would have been possible without the wisdom, forgiveness, and investment of my former high school principal and now business partner, Mr. Harold Jenkins." Applause filled the room as Harold stepped forward. He waited for the clapping to subside before speaking. "Thank you, Michael. When I first walked into this dealership in my gardening clothes, I was judged by my appearance rather than my character." He paused, his eyes finding Blake in the crowd. But what could have ended as just another sad story of prejudice instead became an opportunity for growth and change. Harold gestured to the staff standing around the room. "Every person who works here has now completed our Respect First training program. They've learned that true customer service begins with seeing the person, not just their clothes or their skin color or their age." He turned toward the covered object. "And today, we unveil something that will remind us all of this lesson for years to come." Harold and Michael together pulled the velvet cloth away, revealing a beautiful bronze plaque mounted on a marble stand. Engraved on it were the words, "Judged not by appearance, but by character. Elaine Jenkins." A hush fell over the crowd, followed by another round of applause. After the ceremony, as people mingled and enjoyed refreshments, Blake approached Harold. "Mr. Jenkins," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I want to thank you again. Not just for not getting me fired that day, but for teaching me to see people differently." Harold smiled. "The best thanks you can give me is to keep teaching others." As the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, Harold looked around at what had grown from that moment of disrespect 6 months ago. Yes, he had finally bought his dream car, but he had gained something far more valuable, the knowledge that even at 72, he was still making a difference in the world, one person at a time. And somewhere, he knew Elaine was smiling.